I am Emily Thompson, a covert FBI counterintelligence officer, masquerading as the perfect bride. I never imagined my wedding day would become the stage for my own unmasking. Under the glittering chandelier of the Thompson family estate, I stood at the altar beside Dylan Parker, my heart thrumming like a war drum. Guests raised champagne flutes in polite celebration, yet behind each smile I sensed raw contempt. The Parker fortune had loomed like a mountain over my carefully crafted life, and I'd learned to embrace that shadow. As Dylan completed his vows, his father, Robert Thompson, leaned forward with an icy grin and whispered, "They have no idea who you really are." His words landed harder than any slap. My grip on the ivory bouquet tightened until my knuckles burned. All those years of hiding my true identity, of burying my FBI credentials beneath designer gowns, felt as if they might shatter in a single breath. But a fierce spark ignited within me. This wasn't merely a family spat. It was the opening salvo in a battle I'd been preparing for long before I met Dylan. Their laughter rang like gunfire in my ears. In that moment, I realized the real ceremony was just beginning, and I refused to leave that ballroom defeated. I am the youngest of 3 children in the Thompson family, and growing up in our modest 2-story colonial home in suburban Springfield feels like both a lifetime ago and just last night. My earliest memory is of the morning light filtering through lace curtains as I crept downstairs in my pink robe, tiny feet padding across hardwood floors. The kitchen smelled of freshly brewed folders and sizzling baking. Dad humming a bar of "God Bless America" as he flipped pancakes. Mom's oatmeal cookies cooled on wire racks, and she'd let me sneak one, warm and crumbly, before breakfast. Every Sunday, after Dad closed the pharmacy at 2:00 p.m., we piled into our maroon station wagon for a picnic at Elmwood Park. Dad would bring his thermos of strong black coffee. Mom would pack sandwiches, turkey and Swiss, on white bread, while my brother Nate and sister Lily chased geese along the pond's edge. I remember Mom's laugh when Lily got her tutu caught on a tree branch, and Nate lifted her to freedom. Furry squirrels scampering away in alarm. Those simple moments formed the bedrock of my world, a world I vowed to protect the way Dad protected his customers' health and safety. My father, William Bill Thompson, ran Thompson's Pharmacy on Main Street. By the time I was 10, the shop's neon cross sign had become as familiar as our family cat Jasper. Dad knew every regular by name and prescription history. Mrs. Rodriguez always needed her blood pressure refill on the last Thursday. Mr. Pell came in precisely at 10:15 a.m. for his cholesterol meds. Business was steady. In 2002, annual revenue surpassed $1,200,000, 0 cents. I'd sometimes tag along after school, stocking shelves or organizing pill bottles. Dad would watch me from behind the counter and say, "One day, Emily, you'll make the world a safer place, maybe one dose, one note at a time." I believed him. But everything changed in 2005, the year I turned 12. I remember the morning Dad woke us before dawn, urgency tinged in his voice. He had just received legal papers. Parker Pharmaceuticals, an upstart division of Parker Enterprises, was mounting a hostile takeover of his 2-location chain. They claimed patent infringement on a generic heart med formula he'd sold for years. Within weeks, Dad agreed to sell rather than endure a protracted court battle. The deal closed at $2,300,000, 0 cents. Enough to buy a new house, but insufficient to cover the $3 million, 0 cents, in unsecured debt he'd accrued buying equipment and training staff. A month later, he had a stroke. We lost him 6 days after he was admitted, and the pharmacy shuttered for good. I was 14, Lily was 17, Nate was 19 and away at college. Mom packed us all into her Chevy Malibu and moved us into her sister's small duplex. In the following years, financial hardship taught me resilience. Mom started a home-baked bread business, Karen's Kitchen, selling sourdough loaf at the local farmer's market. She made enough to pay rent and feed us, but every penny came at the cost of dawn-to-dusk labor. I tutored neighborhood kids in math after school to help pay for school clothes. Nate took on a second job at the grocery deli, and we leaned on each other, forming a bond tighter than any contract Parker Enterprises ever drafted. I never forgot the emptiness in Mom's eyes when she counted quarters to make rent, or Nate's shoulders slumping when he couldn't cover my violin lessons. Amid that struggle, a spark ignited in me: law enforcement. At 16, I interned with the local police department's records unit, filing incident reports, watching detectives cross-reference evidence. I saw the power in truth, in bringing wrongdoers to justice. By 18, I'd secured a scholarship to Georgetown University, majoring in criminal justice, where I graduated summa cum laude with $40,000, 0 cents in scholarship aid covering tuition. In summer internships at the DEA and later the CIA, I learned counterintelligence, code-breaking, surveillance tactics. My final internship led me to Quantica, where the FBI Academy offered me a berth in the intelligence branch. I accepted immediately, driven by more than career ambition. I wanted to dismantle the kind of corporate malfeasance that took my father's livelihood and life from us. Before joining the Bureau, I spent 2 years undercover with the FBI's New York field office, infiltrating white-collar fraud rings. I remember my first case, Operation Golden Parachute, a scheme targeting retirement funds. The ring's kingpin, a suited executive named Victor Connors, ciphering $17 million, 0 cents, from elderly investors. I posed as a financial advisor, tracking transactions through shell companies in Delaware. My task force shut him down, recovered $5 million, 0 cents, and sent him to federal prison for 10 years. The victory left a warm glow in my chest, but it also left me cold. Corporate greed hurt real people, and legal loopholes made it nearly impossible to protect families like mine. Through those high-stakes operations, I learned to mask emotions, poker face, they call it. To outsiders, I was Emily Thompson, charming, articulate, and devoted to Dylan Parker, the handsome heir of Parker Enterprises. But under my wedding day gown, I carried the scars of loss. The burning memory of my father's last words as he lay dying: "Protect our community, Em. Don't let them get away with it." Marrying Dylan provided the ultimate cover. His family's name opened doors in Dallas, New York, and Washington. It gave me access to Parker's private board memos, R&D project budget, and offshore holdings. I played the part perfectly grateful bride, doting partner, while downloading internal documents onto a secure FBI server. Yet the memories of family warmth never left me. I still envision Mom kneading dough at dawn, her flour dust hair in a messy bun, singing old hymns about hope. I hear Nate's laughter echoing through our cramped duplex when he'd teach me to dance around our tiny living room. I see Lily's proud face as she graduated from community college before turning 19. Those recollections fueled me through late-night stakeouts and long days behind encryption terminals. They reminded me that the justice I sought wasn't just an abstraction, it was personal. In the quiet moments before I donned my wedding dress, I slipped on a thin gold bracelet engraved with my father's initials, WP, a hidden talisman. No Parker party favor could match its weight on my wrist. As I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror, I whispered an oath: "I will finish what you started, Dad. I will not fail." That vow carried me from those tender childhood kitchens to the grand Thompson Estate ballroom, ready to confront my enemies and remind them what family truly means. Yes, as I stand on the threshold of that glittering chandelier moment, it isn't just the warmth of my memories that holds me steady. It is the promise of retribution, rooted in love and loss, that prepares me to turn the tables and to win. I'd always believed I could blend seamlessly into the Parker world until the first invitation arrived. It came on ivory cardstock, embossed with gold filigree, inviting me to an intimate family weekend at Lake Montclair. I'd RSVP'd enthusiastically, unaware that intimate was code for evaluating the new daughter-in-law. The weekend began with champagne at sunset by the boathouse. I smiled and sipped, watching Dylan steer the vintage mahogany boat across glassy waters. His hand brushed mine, warm reassurance amid unfamiliar faces. But when I turned to exchange a laugh with his cousin Marcus Parker, his smile froze, and he glanced at his phone. Emily, he'd whispered my name as though testing the echo. Then he looked past me, as if seeing a ghost. During dinner that night, I sat between Dylan and his ailing grandfather, Arthur Parker. The table was a study in opulence, crystal goblet, silver platters heaped with truffle mashed potatoes, wagyu filet, and a chocolate souffle for dessert. Conversation fluttered from yacht races to stock projections. I contributed anecdotes about my FBI career, carefully curated, of course. But every anecdote drew polite nods, followed by clipped, hushed asides. At one point, Aunt Vivian Parker raised her eyebrows and asked, "So, Emily, what exactly drew you to counterintelligence? It's rather unconventional for someone marrying into a family business." Her tone was syrupy but edged with steel. I smiled. "I've always been drawn to puzzles," I replied, "and there's no puzzle more complex than human nature." She frowned at my answer, and I sensed she thought my real puzzle was a secret I'd be forced to reveal. That night, in the guest cottage, I found a folded note on my pillow. In precise block letters it read, "Do you really think you can play a game of shadows with us? We see you." No signature, no explanation. My pulse quickened. I tucked it under my pillow and played dumb at breakfast, but I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. The next afternoon, Dylan suggested a charity polo match. I arrived at the field in a tailored white blazer, ready to mingle. As I approached the VIP tent, an aide whispered, "Miss Thompson, the sponsors want a photo op." I nodded and stepped forward, but the camera's flash revealed my expression to the assembled magnet. In that instant, someone in the back row whispered fraud, quiet enough that only I could hear. My cheeks burned, but I forced a laugh and posed, arms around Dylan's waist. Later, scrolling through my phone, I noticed a series of missed calls from an unknown number. I debated calling back, then decided to wait. Instead, I slipped out to the boathouse to clear my head. The water was still, reflecting puffy clouds in a perfect mirror. I pressed my forehead to the wooden rail and let the breeze cool my flushed skin. That evening's rehearsal dinner should have been a balm family sharing stories, toasts to the happy couple, but it only deepened the chill. Robert Thompson, Dylan's father, stood to speak. He recounted tales of Dylan's childhood triumphs, his first bike ride, his graduation with honors, the sale of Parker Pharmaceuticals for over $500 million, 0 cents. Every anecdote was punctuated by applause. After his toast, Robert set his glass down and fixed me with an inscrutable gaze. "Emily," he said softly, "are you certain you're ready to join our family?" His words dripped with doubt. The room fell silent, and all eyes flicked to me. My throat constricted, but I straightened my spine. "I come into this family fully aware of its history and responsibility," I replied. I intend to honor it. I raised my glass. A few guests took sips, but most stared, waiting. When dinner ended, guests loitered, reluctant to disperse. I noticed Marcus slip an envelope into Dylan's hand as he passed. Afterwards, I cornered Dylan in the hallway. "What's that?" I asked, nodding toward his fist. He opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, me, in business account, clipping a press release about Parker's alleged offshore accounts. The date was 3 days ago. "Where did you get this?" I demanded. Dylan's eyes flicked away. "I found it in my office," he said quietly. "Someone mailed it here." His hesitation told me everything. The first sign of real trouble wasn't a harsh word or an icy look. It was the weaponization of my own efforts. Whoever was behind this had access to Parker's secure mail service. That night, I lay awake listening to distant loons calling across the lake. My mind raced through every interaction, every sideways glance. The tension I chalked up to family politics had morphed into something more calculated. They weren't merely testing me. They were setting me up. By sunrise, I had formulated a plan. I would play along, accept the photo, pretend to be rattled, let my guard down just enough to observe. Then I'd trace its origin through Dylan's mail logs and the estate's security cameras I already had discreetly downloaded. Within hours, I'd pinpoint who delivered it. As I dressed for the final brunch, I chose a blouse that concealed my FBI badge in an inside pocket, a visual reminder of the dual life I led. I sipped coffee with the Thompsons, offering polite smiles while mapping alliances in my head. Aunt Vivian nodded as I entered, and for just a moment, her facade slipped, her lips thinned, eyes cold. I noted it. That same afternoon, as Dylan and I prepared to leave Lake Montclair, I lingered at the dock. He joined me, concern etching his handsome features. "Anne, are you okay?" he asked. I placed a gentle hand on his arm. "I am," I lied smoothly. "Better than ever." Inside, I felt the thrill of the hunt because the first signs of trouble had given me the clues I needed. As the boat cut through rippling water toward shore, I vowed that every subtle slight, every whispered doubt, would be repaid tenfold. The game had begun, and I was ready to play and to win. The day of the wedding rehearsal dawned bright and clear. The Thompson estate gardens bathed in golden sunlight. I'd spent the early morning reviewing security footage tracing that first Polaroid's journey through the mailroom. The culprit emerged: Marcus Parker's personal assistant, Lydia Hayes. She'd slipped the photo into Dylan's envelope before delivering it. I'd stored the clip on my phone, ready to play it at the right moment. At 3:00 p.m., guests gathered beneath a pergola draped with white roses. Dylan and I stood before Robert Thompson as he walked us through the ceremony order. He seemed composed, even cordial, until his gaze landed on me. He paused mid-sentence, his voice catching. "One more note," he said. "There's something we need to address before tomorrow." My pulse spiked. He motioned to Lydia, who froze beside the double doors. Robert held up a stack of printed emails. "These arrived this morning, internal Parker documents, leaked to the press." He scanned the crowd: board members, socialites, distant cousins. "It appears our new daughter-in-law has been playing spy games." Lydia's eyes darted to me. I felt the room tilt. Gasps rippled through the assembled guests. A murmur started low and swelled like a rising tide. Aunt Vivian's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle Henry leaned forward, white-knuckled. Even Grandpa Arthur's face creased in shock. "Is this true?" Robert asked, holding up the email chain that detailed offshore accounts, shell company transfers, and clandestine payoffs documents I had indeed downloaded weeks before. My breath caught. I forced a calm that felt brittle. "Yes," I said softly. I obtained these from your private server. A hush fell. Then Vivian laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. You think blackmail counts as love? She sneered. You've turned our wedding into your personal vendetta. The entire family turned on me as though I were a street performer caught stealing. Dylan stepped toward me, confusion and hurt mingling on his face. Emily, what are you doing? He whispered, voice trembling. I glanced at him, pain twisting in my chest. I am finishing what I started, I replied. Then Robert turned back to the guests. You see before you a fraud and an infiltrator. His tone brooked no argument. I revoke tonight's rehearsal. Emily, leave our grounds immediately. As he spoke, Lydia sank to her knees, tears streaking her cheeks. It was his idea, she sobbed, indicating Marcus, who avoided her gaze. He told me to test her loyalty. My heart hammered. Marcus emerged from the crowd, eyes darting. I wanted to see if she was worthy, he said, voice cracking. Dad, I thought. Robert raised a hand. Shut up. I felt my carefully constructed world splinter. The guests began to drift away, murmuring accusations. I stood alone under that white rose pergola, stripped bare. I felt the sun suddenly too hot, the stone floor too cold. The betrayal cut deeper than any sword. Gathering my composure, I pulled out my phone and tapped the video clip of Lydia's confession and Marcus's directive. With trembling fingers, I connected to the estate's AV system, using the credentials I'd uploaded earlier. The speakers crackled. If you doubt her, I said, voice amplified and crisp. See for yourselves. Behind me, a large screen lowered from the pergola rafters. Lydia's tear-streaked face blinked into the audio carried clearly. Make her slip up. Expose her. His tone was both arrogant and fearful. The camera cut back to Lydia, choking on her confession. Shock froze the crowd. I turned to Robert. This is the real betrayal, that you implanted false doubts in your own house. I held his gaze. You used your child's insecurities to manipulate me. A murmur rose among the guests, indignation at Marcus's manipulation. Robert flushed crimson. He seemed to shrink, humiliated in front of his peers. This is an outrage, he stuttered, but his voice lacked conviction. His allies exchanged uncomfortable glances. Vivian covered her mouth, startled. Even Grandpa Arthur looked down, shame in his eyes. Now you know, I said, lowering my voice so only they could hear. My vendetta is not against Dylan, it's against corporate greed that destroyed my family. I infiltrated your empire to gather evidence, and I will see justice served. Dylan forced his composure. He stepped to my side and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. I believe you, he said, loud enough for neighbors to hear. I saw her work helping charities, volunteering in underserved communities. She's the real Emily. A ripple of support followed his words, and aunt and uncles exchanged glances that shifted from suspicion to curiosity. The sudden tide of sympathy for me was intoxicating. But Robert would not relent. He raised his voice over the murmurs. Dylan, come with me. He grabbed his son's arm and dragged him toward the double doors. Guests parted like a river. Dylan stopped, bending to whisper, Meet me tomorrow at noon. We'll fix this. Then Robert shoved him outside. The doors slammed, leaving me standing alone. Lydia fled past me, sobbing. I watched her go, torn between pity and contempt. The estate staff reassembled the pergola seating in chaotic disarray. I stood in the center, white roses falling at my feet, as attendants hurried to collect them. Sunlight glinted off discarded petals, raining down like mournful tears. The betrayal was complete and public. In that moment, rage and sorrow collided. My carefully nurtured calm shattered. I felt the hot sting of tears as I clenched both fists. Every fiber of my being screamed for retribution. Yet I controlled myself. I breathed in the floral air, steadying my racing heart. This was the turning point. Every guest had now witnessed the truth, the Parker family's own lies and schemes, and they'd seen my resolve. Gathering the discarded bouquet, I placed it at the base of the pergola, a silent symbol of a wedding ceremony broken. Then I turned and walked slowly toward the front gates, head held high. I did not flee in shame. I left as a warrior begins the next phase of battle. Behind me, the screen still displayed Marcus's confession on a loop. Guests paused to stare, whispers of "I never trusted them" humming through the air. The first salvo of my revenge had landed. Tomorrow would be my wedding day if I chose to return, but I had other plans. In a world ruled by power and money, I had just exposed the cracks in the Parker facade. The major betrayal moment was not my downfall. It was the catalyst that, and as I passed beneath the wrought iron gates, I vowed to harness the very scandal they'd tried to pin on me and turn it into their ruin. This was no longer about a wedding rehearsal. It was the prelude to the reckoning they never saw coming. I barely noticed the dusty road beneath the tires as the car whisked me away from the Thompson estate. My chest burned with betrayal's fire, each breath a shard of glass. I stared out the window at rolling fields, attempting to quell the storm inside me, but the motion only blurred my vision. I'd gone from radiant bride-to-be to public spectacle in moments. When the driver pulled up at the Parker guest house, I slipped out without a word and hurried inside. The foyer's marble floor and sweeping staircase mocked me with their pristine elegance. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, my heels echoing like gunshots. In the master suite, I closed the door behind me and dropped to the plush carpet, heart hammering so loud it felt like an avalanche. Tears came unbidden. I'd trained myself to be steel poker-faced, emotionless, yet right now, emotion overwhelmed discipline. I hugged my knees, rocking as ragged sobs tore from my throat. Memories flooded me, my father's gentle smile, Mom's hands kneading bread, Nate cheering me on at graduations. How easily those moments had been buried under a life of subterfuge. My phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from Dylan, text messages from Grace, and dozens from unknown numbers. Reporters? Family? My fingers trembled as I silenced every notification. I needed silence, space to crumble. The room's opulence offered no comfort. A crystal chandelier cast fractured light across embroidered drapes. I flopped onto the bed, clutching the ivory bouquet I'd tucked into my purse. The delicate roses now felt like thorns digging into my palms. I placed them on the nightstand and pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the bedside lamp. I hated feeling vulnerable. In the field, vulnerability was a liability. Here, it made me human. My training demanded composure, but grief and rage had breached my defenses. I closed my eyes and tried to count my breaths, 1, 2, 3, yet each inhale seared my lungs. A single question haunted me. Had I been wrong to trust love alongside justice? Dylan had stood by me only briefly before his family ripped me apart. My own vendetta had left me exposed. I let out a strangled cry. Grace's voice echoed in my memory. "You're stronger than you know." I reached for my duffel bag and pulled out the small leather notebook I carried since college. Inside were contacts, case notes, and a list of objectives, my blueprint for bringing down Parker Enterprises. I thumbed the first page, where my father's handwriting read "Protect our family's dignity." But I had lost my dignity today. Instead of feeling triumphant, I felt hollow, as if every secret I'd hoarded now marked me. I slammed the notebook shut, tears spilling down my cheeks. Hours passed in a blur of exhaustion and self-reproach. My body curled into a fetal position on the bed, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. In my dreams, I was back at the pharmacy counter, stocking bottles, only to watch plaques of orange prison jumpsuits marching toward me. I jolted awake in a sweat, heart pounding. A soft knock sounded at the door. "LM." Dylan's voice was tentative. I pressed my face into the pillow, breathing rapidly. He tried the handle. It was locked. "Please, let me in." I didn't respond. He called again, voice breaking. "I know I messed up. Please talk to me." I sat up, clutching the pillow to my chest. My sobs had quieted to shaky breaths. With a hesitant hand, I slid open the bolt. Dylan stood there, eyes red, suit rumpled. He looked as battered as I felt. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have seen what was happening. I was afraid to stand up to them." I stared at him, unsure whether to hate or to lean into his arms. He stepped in, closing the door gently. "You didn't deserve any of that," he said. "I love you, Emily. I know you have your mission, but you're more than that mission." His words unraveled me. I'd tried so hard to separate my personal and professional lives that I'd forgotten what it meant to be loved. My vision blurred again. "They made me out to be a villain," I choked out. "They stole my moment." Dylan knelt beside me and took my hands. "Let them," he said softly. "You exposed them for who they are. Now it's their turn to feel the fallout." He brushed a strand of hair from my face, and his touch was tender, grounding. I closed my eyes, the dam inside me wavering. His unwavering faith felt like a lifeline. For a moment, I allowed myself to lean into his strength. But the collapse of my carefully built facade had left jagged edges. I couldn't ignore the reality my plan depended on absolute control. Yet every leak, every setback, had cut deeper than any blow. I sat up, wiping tears. "I can't afford to break," I said, voice steadier. "Not now." Dylan nodded. He fetched water and handed it to me. I sipped, letting the cool liquid soothe my raw throat. He waited patiently, then said, "Take all the time you need, but know I'm with you every step." I managed a small nod. Once he left, I stood and paced the suite. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the windows. I pressed a hand to the glass and surveyed the grounds below. The estate looked serene, oblivious to the whirlwind I'd unleashed. I ran a hand through my hair and took a deep breath. The collapse had purged my certainty. I faced my vulnerabilities now exposed, but vulnerability could be transformed into clarity. I would harness this pain, feed it into renewed purpose. I rifled through my bag and retrieved the duffel where I kept surveillance reports. I spread the documents on the bed: schedules, phone logs, security blueprints. My mind sharpened as I organized the data, each sheet a piece of the larger puzzle. My breathing slowed, and a cold calm settled over me. Emotional collapse had cracked the armor of complacency. Now, the raw edges of anger and sorrow could be tempered into focus. By the time I packed a small overnight kit, dusk had fallen. I pocketed my badge, holstered my service pistol, and slipped out into the corridor, determined to reclaim control. The collapse had been devastating, but it was also the crucible forging a stronger resolve. As I descended the stairs, I whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. It's the turning point." With every step, I felt the weight of betrayal shift from drag to driving force. And with that shift, I was ready to rise. Dawn's pale light filtered through the gauzy curtains as I sat at the small dressing table in the guest house suite, reviewing my notes. The emotional collapse of last night had peeled away layers of certainty, leaving raw ambition in its wake. I traced my father's initials WT engraved on the thin gold bracelet on my wrist, seeking the strength that had guided me since childhood. A soft knock came at the door. Grace Miller, once Emma, slipped inside, her expression measured but warm. She carried a steaming mug of black coffee and a manila envelope sealed with red wax. "Thought you could use this," she said quietly, setting the coffee on my notes. Her gesture felt like a bridge thrown across my isolation. I took the mug, savoring the bitter warmth. "Thanks," I murmured, lifting my gaze to meet her eyes. Grace wore tailored slacks and a crisp white blouse, professional, no nonsense, but I knew the loyalty beneath her calm exterior. She'd been my roommate at Georgetown, the only friend who never questioned my secrets. She handed me the envelope. "Dylan asked me to give you this," she explained. Inside, I found a USB drive and a single sheet of paper listing 3 names: Lydia Hayes, Vivian Parker, and Marcus Parker, each accompanied by a sequence of dates and dollar amounts. Under Lydia's name, $15,000 on May 12. Vivian, $250,000, 0 cents on March 8. Marcus, $75,000, 0 cents on. It was a ledger, evidence of bribery, hush payments meant to secure their complicity. My pulse quickened. "Where did he get this?" I asked, voice low. Grace hesitated, then said, "Dylan discovered it in his father's safe backup ledgers for their offshore accounts. He wants you to have it." Her gaze flicked to the window, as if measuring witnesses. "He believes you can use it." My heart swelled with gratitude and a hint of guilt. Dylan risked everything to help me. I slid the USB into my bag then. "This changes everything," I said, eyes bright with purpose. Grace nodded. "There's more. I contacted an old journalist friend, Mia Rodriguez at the Dallas Tribune. She's ready to run a front-page exposé as soon as she gets the docs." A spark ignited a fuse of possibility. The plan had been to leak Parker's misdeeds quietly through internal channels. Now, with hard evidence and media on standby, I could force the family's hand publicly. My resolve solidified. I would hit them where it hurt most: their reputation. I rose and paced by the window, gazing down at the manicured lawns of the Parker estate. The family might rally after last night's scandal, but this time I would deliver a knockout blow. I turned to Grace. "I need you to confirm Mia's wire transfer details and get her the USD tonight, and arrange a secure line, no digital trace." She tapped notes into her phone. "Already on it." I breathed deeply, feeling the cold clarity of determination replace the fog of despair. Grace's arrival had been the spark I needed to shift from reactive to proactive, to transform my pain into power. By mid-morning, I was dressed in a tailored navy suit, practical for meetings yet still polished. I met Grace in the hallway. "Let's move," I said. We slipped into a black SUV that Dylan arranged, windows tinted for discretion. As we drove toward a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town, I reviewed our objectives. Transfer the ledger and supporting files to Mia, ensure the story breaks within 48 hours. Secure press credentials for me so I can appear as a whistleblower. Prepare to deploy FBI injunctions if Parker attorneys try to block publication. Grace parked near the warehouse's rear entrance. We entered through a side door into a sparse interior, concrete floors, exposed pipes, a single folding table with 2 chairs. Mia Rodriguez emerged from the shadows, camera bag slung over her shoulder. She greeted us with a firm handshake, journalist resolve written on her face. I slid the USB across the table. "This is everything." I tapped the paper ledger. Signed payments to cover up everything from embezzlement to witness intimidation. Mia's eyes widened as she pocketed the driver. She exhaled. You have no idea how big this is. Grace handed her an unmarked envelope. Wire transfer confirmation as promised. Mia opened it briefly and nodded. Funds arrived. I'll publish in the 6 a.m. edition. Interviews tonight. I felt a thrill of victory, but tempered it with Carper's legal team, I said. They would file an emergency injunction, freeze assets, maybe call you defamation. Mia smirked. I've dealt with hostile subpoenas. They'll need more than money to scare me. We left the warehouse under cover of dusk. As Grace drove me back to the guest house, I stared out at the skyline's glow. My phone buzzed a secure message from Dylan. I've arranged for you to address the press at Parker Plaza tomorrow. Use them to deliver your statement. My lips curved into a determined smile. The recovery spark had ignited into a controlled blaze. By leveraging media and legal strategy, I would force the Parker family to face the consequences on their terms and in the public eye. That night, as I reviewed talking points in the mirror, I slipped on my father's bracelet. I whispered, "This is for you, Dad." I practiced the opening lines, "I'm Emily Thompson, former PHB fiancée of Dylan Parker. I stand before you not as a jilted bride, but as a citizen seeking accountability." Each word felt like steel-woven silk, resilient and precise. When I finally lay down, exhaustion tugged at me, but my mind raced with plans, coordinating with the FBI press office, liaising with Mia, confirming security at Parker Plaza. The emotional collapse had stripped away illusions. The recovery spark had lit the path forward. And as sleep claimed me, I vowed that tomorrow's headlines would not be about a shattered wedding rehearsal, but about the unraveling of a corrupt empire and the woman who refused to let injustice stand. I arrived at Parker Plaza just before dawn, my breath misting in the cool morning air. The grand marble steps loomed before me, where the Parker name was engraved in bold capitals. 5 minutes later, I stood behind the podium, flanked by Dylan and Grace, as a line of news cameras clicked to life. A hiss fell over the assembled crowd, reporters, curious onlookers, and a handful of Parker loyalists who'd shown up to protect their family's reputation. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady. "I am Emily Thompson, special agent with the FBI." A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. I let it settle. "Today I am here not as a jilted bride, but as an officer of the law demanding accountability." I clicked the remote in my hand. Behind me, the LED screen illuminated with a single bullet point: Parker Enterprises $1.20 revenue versus $340.00 M offshore. Murmurs rose. I waited for silence, then continued. "Public records show Parker Enterprises declared $1,200,000,000 in revenue last year, yet $340,000,000 was covertly routed to shell companies abroad." I advanced the slide columns of numbers detailing transfers to accounts in the Caymans, Singapore, and Luxembourg. Those transactions constitute tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy. The FBI has secured search warrants, frozen assets, and opened formal RICO investigations. Robert Parker's stoic facade cracked. He lumbered toward the barricade, mouth opening as though to interrupt, but Dylan placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Grace tightened her grip on my arm, her calm a steady anchor. I turned back to the crowd. "This is not merely financial malpractice, it's corporate betrayal that devastated hardworking families." I held up a framed photograph of my childhood home's pharmacy sign, Thompson's Pharmacy, Est 1972. The image drew an involuntary gasp from many. In 2005, Parker Pharmaceuticals orchestrated hostile takeover of my father's pharmacy chain for $2,300,000, triggering debts that led to his fatal stroke. 2 months later, he was gone. The photo's shutters stuttered. I replaced the frame on the podium. Justice demands more than sympathy. It demands action. I clicked again. A new slide displayed 3 names with dollar figures: Lydia Hayes $15.00, K. Vivian Parker $250.00, K. Marcus Parker $75.00, K. These hush payments were meant to buy silence after last week's rehearsal scandal. All evidence, including ledgers and email trails, has been authenticated by the FBI's Digital Forensics Division. A reporter shouted, "Agent Thompson, what are your next steps?" I leveled my gaze. Tomorrow morning, subpoenas will be served on every Parker board member. Charges will include securities fraud, tax evasion, and witness tampering. By day's end, Parker Enterprises' executive suite will be emptied and trust in their brand destroyed. Applause erupted, punctuated by click-clacks of keyboards as journalists tweeted update. I paused to let the gravity sink in, then shifted tone. But justice is not only punitive, it's restorative. The screen shifted to photos of polluted riverbanks and rusted water pumps. For decades, Parker's chemical runoff has contaminated communities along the Trinity River. Under federal environmental statutes, they face $42 million, 0 cents, in fines, and a court-mandated cleanup overseen by independent watchdog. Cheers broke out from community activists in the front row. Vivian Parker's eyes narrowed. She stepped forward, voice trembling. "You're destroying our family's legacy." I met her gaze directly. "Legacy is only as strong as its integrity. Your family built this company on the backs of small-town pharmacies. Now you must rebuild trust through transparency." Dylan moved to my side. "I stand with Emily," he announced. His support was met with surprise applause. A few Parker loyalists even nodded. "She's fought for the public good her entire career," he added. His words carried weight. He was still the Parker heir. I seized the moment. To the shareholders and board of Parker Enterprises, I offer a choice: cooperate fully, disclose all internal records, and commit to restitution, or face federal indictments that will destroy the company's valuation and your personal assets. I clicked once more. The final slide showed a countdown clock, 48 hours to comply. Pacific engulfed the plaza. The framed photograph of my father's pharmacy shimmered on screen. I closed the remote and stepped back. "This is not vengeance," I said quietly, yet every microphone captured it. "It is justice delivered swiftly, transparently, and without prejudice." As I walked off the stage, cameras followed, catching every expression on Robert and Vivian's faces: shock, resignation, then grudging acceptance. Reporters surged forward for interviews. Grace guided me gently toward the security line. Dylan slipped an arm around me as we moved. Later, in the private press tent, I answered questions confirming that the FBI had secured key witness testimony, that asset freezes were already in place, and that environmental cleanup would begin within 30 days. Each answer reinforced the shift in power. I was no longer the hunter, but the hunter. By noon, the Parker legal team issued a statement acknowledging the FBI's actions and pledging cooperation. Stock prices plummeted 22% on the NYSE. Within hours, news outlets nationwide ran headlines like "Bride-turned-agent topples corporate empire" and "FBI's unlikely hero exposed family fortune." That evening, I returned to the guest house, exhaustion settling into my bones. Dylan met me at the door, relief and pride in his eyes. "You did it," he whispered. I smiled, though my mind was already racing ahead to the indictment filings, to the injunction hearings, to rebuilding my own life beyond the vendetta. In the quiet of my room, I held the gold bracelet engraved with W. What against my wrist. The same bracelet I'd worn as a talisman since childhood. I closed my eyes and let the day's victories settle, victories not just for me, but for every small business owner and community harmed by Parker's greed. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring fresh challenges. Courtroom battles, political pushback, smear campaigns. Yet I faced them unbowed, armed with truth and the promise of justice. The tables had turned. What began as a wedding rehearsal humiliation had culminated in the public unraveling of a corporate dynasty. And as sleep claimed me, I whispered into the dark, "For you, Dad. This is only the beginning." 6 months have passed since Parker Enterprises' downfall, and in that time, Grace Miller has quietly become my anchor. On the morning of my first day back at the Bureau's Dallas field office, she surprised me with a gift that mirrored our journey. I arrived at her loft, a converted brick warehouse with tall windows overlooking the Trinity River, wearing my FBI blazer and a weary grin. Grace greeted me at the door, her usual poised composure softened by excitement. In her hand was a small velvet box. "Open it," she urged, her voice catching. Inside lay a delicate diamond pendant on a slender gold chain. The stone was cut in the shape of a single teardrop, the same motif my father's pharmacy used on its old signage. I lifted it with trembling fingers. "I had it made," Grace said. "I traced the cut from an antique Tiffany catalog. It's called Perseverance. Just like you." My throat tightened. "It's perfect," I whispered, fastening the chain around my neck. The cool metal settled against my skin, a reminder of strength born from hardship. Grace poured 2 mugs of chamomile tea. We sat on her well-worn leather sofa, framed by stacks of legal briefs and journalism clippings. "You saved my career," she said, referring to the Parker exposé that starred her testimony. "And you reminded me why truth matters." I recalled the night she handed me that USB drive in the guest house, how her quiet confidence sparked the media coup that ignited our victory. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied. "Your connections, your bravery, Grace, you risked so much," she shrugged. "I believed in you, in us." Her eyes glistened. "Now that the legal dust has settled, I wanted to give you something that carries both our legacies." I smiled, tracing the pendant's teardrop edge. It symbolized loss and triumph, rage and redemption. "I'll wear it every day," I promised, like a compass. We spent the afternoon planning outreach for Thompson's Legacy, a foundation we established to support small businesses threatened by corporate takeovers. In our first grant cycle, we awarded $150,000, 0 cents, to 5 pharmacies in Texas and Louisiana. Grace managed the applications. I oversaw compliance. We laughed over spreadsheets and brainstormed a gala fundraiser for autumn. Before I left, Grace walked me to the door and hugged me fiercely. "You gave them justice," she said. "Now let this be our new chapter, one built on hope, not revenge." As I stepped into the sunlight, the diamond pendant caught the glare and flashed like a promise. In that glint, I saw everything we'd endured and the brighter future we were forging together. I watched from the gallery as the judge read the verdict: guilty on all counts for securities fraud, conspiracy to launder money, and environmental violations. Robert and Vivian Parker slumped in their seats as the courtroom erupted in gasps. Marcus Parker stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. The prosecution laid out their case: $340 million, 0 cents in hidden transfers, $250, 0 cents in hush payments, and $42 million, 0 cents in cleanup fines. Every financial figure was etched into the public record, immutable proof that the empire they'd built on deceit was built on sand. When the bailiff read the sentencing guidelines, a hush fell. Marcus was ordered to serve 8 years in federal prison, plus 3 years supervised release. Fines totaling $1,500,000, 0 cents, garnished from his personal accounts. Vivian received 6 years, with assets including 3 luxury condos and 2 Gulfstream jets, seized to cover $3 million, 0 cents in forfeitures. Robert the Patriarch was hit hardest, 10 years behind bars, $5 million, 0 cents in fines, and personal guarantees revoking his ownership of Parker Enterprises. Their family name, once synonymous with wealth and status, now carried the stench of criminality. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as I stepped onto the marble steps. I had been subpoenaed as a key witness, and reporters pressed microphone toward me. "Agent Thompson," one shouted, "any regrets?" I shook my head. "Justice has been served. No one is above the law." Clapping erupted among onlookers. I felt a surge of vindication tempered by a solemn respect for due process. These weren't just names on a ledger, they were human beings who'd chosen corruption. Now they would face the consequences. Within days, Parker Enterprises stock plunged, another 27%. The board, stripped of its founding family, voted unanimously to rename the company New Horizons, Inc. They appointed an interim CEO with my former informants, Carla Jenkins, who pledged transparency, compliance, and a $100 million 0 cents trust fund for environmental restoration. Newspapers dubbed it "reverse of a ruined giant." The irony wasn't lost on me, a corporation saved by the very whistleblower it once sought to silence. At the Parker family estate, life changed too. Marcus' fiancée broke their engagement. His mother, Vivian, penned a contrite letter to shareholders, expressing deep remorse and heartfelt apologies for her errors in judgment. The letter, published in the Dallas Tribune, read more like a legal brief than a human apology. My inbox flooded with messages, some from former Parker employees who thanked me for ending toxic leadership, others from community members who'd suffered the company's pollution. Back at the FBI field office, I filed my final report. The investigation dossier filled 3 leather binders, each brimming with evidence, bank statements, email chains, environmental impact studies. As I sealed the binder, I reflected on how close I'd come to losing everything: love, career, even my sense of self, to this vendetta. Yet seeing the Parker's empire crumble under the weight of truth reaffirmed my conviction accountability is the bedrock of justice. A month later, I attended the sentencing hearings aftermath celebration at Thompson's Legacy headquarters. We had awarded $200, 0 in new grants to pharmacies that survived hostile takeovers. Grace raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To justice restored," she toasted. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the soft jingle of my father's bracelet. It was more than a memento now, it was a symbol of triumph over greed. That evening, as I walked through the empty halls of the Parker estate, now under federal receivership, I paused before the grand staircase. The chandeliers that once glittered at my failed rehearsal dinner now lay dark, covered in dust. I placed a single white rose on the bottom step, the same variety I'd carried under that chandelier months ago. The petals were crisp, unblemished, an omen of renewal. I whispered into the silence, "This house is no longer yours." Then I turned and walked away, each step echoing down the marble hall. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The empire had fallen, but from its ruins I saw the beginnings of something honest, something just proof that even the greatest power can be toppled by a single, unwavering truth. I returned to the Bureau's Dallas field office, feeling lighter than I had in months, my senses heightened by purpose rather than rage. My cubicle sat at the end of the row, overlooked by a framed bureau seal and a faded photograph of the Capitol dome. For the first time, I didn't flinch at the sight of my father's bracelet on my wrist. Its weight now reminded me of triumph, not obligation. I hung up my overcoat and sat down at my desk, revealing the final after-act report. The Parkers' assets were frozen, the indictment sealed, and restitution funds allocated. Tom said Legacy had disbursed over $350,000, 0 cents in grants to small businesses hurt by corporate takeovers. Justice, I realized, was not served once it was an ongoing commitment. For weeks, I conducted follow-up interviews with community leaders and former Parker employees. In a rural Texas town, a pharmacist tearfully recounted how a $25,000, 0 cent microgrant from our foundation enabled her to restock essential medications after Parker's takeover had nearly shuttered her doors. In Dallas, an environmental group used their $50,000, 0 cents award to replace lead-contaminated pipes in Low Group North Hunter. Each story reinforced my conviction: accountability must translate into tangible healing. I compiled these accounts into a presentation for FBI leadership, advocating for a new task force focused on corporate accountability and community restoration. The idea was met with enthusiastic approval, proof that one person's resolve can reshape institutional priorities. Outside work, my personal life found balance. Dylan and I moved into a small condominium overlooking Key Est Park, cozy enough for two, but spacious for our collective ambitions. We painted the walls pale gray and filled the shelves with books on law, business ethics, and baking recipes. One with Dylan's proposals was to perfect sourdough. Grace often joined us for weekend brunches, where we'd strategize new grant cycles or simply laugh over imperfect pancakes. These moments of domestic calm reminded me that justice is both public action and private joy. I understood now that revenge, when tempered by compassion, can seed renewal. One Sunday afternoon, Mom flew in from Springfield. She wore a simple sundress and carried a loaf of her homemade sourdough, now a staple at Dallas farmers markets, thanks to our grants supporting her business expansion. I led her through our condo, stopping at the living room window to watch children playing by the pond. She squeezed my hand and said, "You honored your father's memory." I felt tears prick my eyes. I did, Mom, and I honored my own journey. We embraced 2 generations bound by loss, resilience, and finally, restoration. Reflecting on the path from that humiliating rehearsal dinner to this moment, I distilled 3 core lessons. First, never underestimate the power of preparation. My covert work gathering evidence laid the ground for every breakthrough. Second, leverage your support network. Dylan's belief and Grace's unwavering loyalty were catalysts for success. Third, transform pain into progress. Emotional collapse can feel like an abyss, but it can also clear the way for clarity and renewed purpose. These principles guided my actions, and, I believe, can guide anyone facing injustice. Looking ahead, I've accepted a promotion to lead the new Corporate Accountability Task Force, partnering with prosecutors, environmental agencies, and community organizations. Our mission to monitor high-risk corporate actors proactively, rather than chasing scandals reactively. It's ambitious work, but I draw strength from every small business we've saved and every clean stream we've restored. I no longer see justice as a singular event. It's a living process rooted in vigilance and empathy. To those watching this story unfold, whether you're a law enforcement colleague, a small business owner, or someone who's ever felt wronged, I offer this: hold on to your truth and don't let fear silence you. Seek allies who reinforce your values, and remember that accountability isn't just about punishment. It's about rebuilding trust. Justice is most powerful when it uplifts the vulnerable and reforms the system for all. If you found inspiration in my journey from betrayed bride to agents of change, join the conversation. Share your own stories of resilience in the comments, and consider supporting local businesses facing corporate pressure. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life accounts of justice in action. Together, we can ensure that integrity triumphs over impunity and that every setback becomes the spark for meaningful change.